Welcome to Fluentish, the podcast. Season 1 of this show is called The Bilingual Blueprint from Hesitation to Conversation, and you've tuned in to episode 4, where we are addressing the question, but how do I know which accent is the right accent?
If you're new here, I'm Rebecca, founder and author at Little Crab Educational Press. I've been learning Mandarin for over 20 years, and I make really yummy goulash.
I'm Lisa, co-owner and graphic designer at Little Crab Educational Press, a French language learner, Rebecca's little sister, and I have a double jointed jaw and thumbs.
We firmly believe that language learning is for everyone, so you won't find any language snobbery here. Whether you want to be fluent or are happy being fluent-ish, just come as you are, whatever your level.
We're here to cheer you on.
This episode of Fluentish, the podcast, is brought to you by Flowdesk, our favorite email marketing tool. Flowdesk keeps everything on brand, is easy to use, beautifully designed, and seamless. And Flowdesk does not punish you for growing your business. Start for free and then enjoy unlimited emails and subscribers for one flat rate. Get excited for powerful yet intuitive and affordable email list building. Use the link flowdesk.com/c/littlecrabpress to get 50% off your first year of Flowdesk. Okay, Rebecca, as our resident CELTA certified language teacher, what would you say to the question, but how do I know which accent is the right accent?
I hope it's obvious that the answer to that question is essentially, people should not accent shame themselves or anyone else. We all have an accent. Every single person on earth who communicates in spoken or signed words. Yes, sign languages, including American Sign Language, have variations that are similar to accents in spoken languages. These variations are often called regional dialects rather than accents, but they serve a similar function.
So awesome.
Now, what were you going to say?
I just said so awesome.
Now, there are strong arguments for getting an accent as close to a native speaker's accent as possible, and I fully believe that is what we should shoot for as language learners. But at a certain point, we have to recognize that if you are succeeding in communicating with a native speaker, then your accent is officially legitimate.
Sure.
So really, I think teachers should be told to encourage students to achieve a legitimate accent rather than a native accent. A legitimate accent is one that is natural to their voice and themselves, but still communicates with native speakers as clearly as can be hoped for as talking humans. Because let's face it, native speakers have misunderstandings about pronunciation too, all the time.
There are so many times that you can tell if somebody reads a lot because they mispronounce a word because they've only ever seen it written down. I have so many very book nerdy friends who will say something and I'm like, sorry? And I need to get them to say it again and give me more context, and I'll be like, oh, you mean this?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I've only ever seen it written down. Anyway.
When I was a kid, I had Archie comics, right? You remember that?
Oh,
and for the longest time, I thought the character Reggie was Riggy.
Yeah.
Which is weird because Reggie is not an is.
I mean, Reggie would have been more understandable, but you said Riggy. I remember that.
I think my brain went Riggy.
Yeah. And I was like,
to this day, I've never met a Riggy. It really curdles my way when people get their knickers in a twist about other people's accents. Obviously, racism is a part of that, and that's really sad. If people broadly could see that accents are fluid and always changing, this whole debate about correct or right accents would not always get so snobby. One of the major reasons I pursued Mandarin is because countless Chinese people complimented me on my accent in ways I felt were sincere. Some would express genuine surprise, etc. But
I don't. Fun. It's fun to see. It's fun to see.
Oh yeah,
I like being with you when you speak to someone and they're like,
yeah. I'm 6 feet tall, by the way, viewers at home. So that also adds some of the wow factor, I guess. But I don't fool myself to think that as much as I love my own Beijing influence accent, I don't still have a Canadian Chinese accent, because my consonants and vowels, and in some cases intonation, will be influenced by having grown up where I did. But that doesn't make my accent illegitimate. This is why I think it's not cringe to say words the way they sound in other languages when
Eh.
speaking English overall. Meaning, instead of saying, for example, Maori, the language of Aotearoa, which I can't say, New Zealand, I say Modi because I can. So that's one word that I've learned the correct pronunciation of, and I practice saying it as close to what I think it's supposed to be when I'm sprinkling it into English, not to show off and be like, oh, look how worldly I am, but because why not say it the way that it's supposed to be said if you are capable of that? Now, the correct Modi word for New Zealand is Aotearoa, but again, I don't know how to say, I think it's like, I'm not even going to try. I need to hear it a few more times because I actually hadn't heard it until I went to New Zealand. So I heard Modi before I went to New Zealand, but I hadn't heard Aotearoa. Just kidding.
Right. So it's funny that we get tripped up with vocabulary because, like, it's different if your accent prevents you from saying a person's name correctly.
Yeah.
Like, there's no in French. So my friend Heather, who's married to a French guy, when she goes to France, he calls her Heather.
Yeah.
But when they go
Eder.
together, a lot of his friends are going to say Eder, Eder,
Mhm.
Eder to her, which like she's not offended by that. But like if a French person says to a Canadian person, like French is one of our two official languages. If a French person says, "My name is Pierre," and you go, "Hi, Pierre," or you say, "Hi, Peter," you're not saying that person's name. So I actually, so we have this book. I have a 3-year-old, and I have this book that's called Peekaboo Pierre, and I always, I really like lean into the French accents when I do there's like 3 supporting characters, and when I'm doing their voices, I get really thick. But one night, I was annoyed with my 3-year-old, and I was really tired, and he was like, "I want this book," and I'm like, "Okay, Peekaboo, here is Pierre. Can you catch something just for you?" And he goes, "No, no, 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 Pierre." I was like, "You're right." Put it over again.
Aw.
That's really cute. He's like, "No, no, no. I want that book. Don't read me this book. Read me that book, Mama." Anyway, sorry, tangent. Just I think it's funny that we worry about it, but most people are willing to try to say someone's name correctly, even when those sounds don't appear in
Right.
our own language. Or I
Right.
guess it does depend a little bit on how adjacent to your own language the sounds are, though.
But that's a good example that, if we're going to try to say people's names correctly and there's a borrowed word in English,
Mm-hmm.
why not try to say it the way that the native speaker would say it, if
And
you can and if you know it.
the weird thing too, in Canada in particular, because we have French as an official language, like we grew up saying foyer,
Right.
not foyer,
Right. Right.
and we're not like if we like
Right.
we don't go foyer. It feels so funny. Like why?
Yeah.
Why? Why are we okay with like we say creme de la creme? Why are we okay with that?
Mm,
We don't put creme in our coffee. We put cream in our coffee. Well, I don't,
yeah.
but you can put cream in your coffee, but you say creme de la creme, and we don't go, "Oh my name." So it's weird.
I mean, in that case, that's using the vocabulary and not the accent because it would be crème de la crème, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
I'm sort of thinking about like the anglicization of a word that we borrow from somewhere else. We
Hmm.
don't feel silly doing that. Although I
Well,
guess what you're talking about, it could be the obnoxious part could be someone being like, "Oh, it was just the creme de la creme." You might be like,
and they're
"Okay,
just trying
calm
to
down."
pass it off like they talk like that
Yeah,
normally all the time.
totally.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
natch.
That is the tricky part about this is you can run the risk of looking like you're trying to show off or something,
Yeah, for sure.
but at the same time, when it comes to Mandarin especially, I try to say Chinese words as they sound in Mandarin because it sounds and feels foreign to me to say them the way a Westerner or a Canadian would, because I know for certain how the Chinese word is pronounced in Chinese. So why would I Canadianify it and make it like lesser or farther away from its original? And this is especially the case with Chinese words that start with the X sound in pinyin, but people say it like an SH if they're English speaker. For example, instead of saying shay shay, saying xie xie, right? So the sh sound instead of a sh sound. So President Xi Jinping in China, his name is spelled XI in pinyin, but Westerners say Xi, President Xi, because they've never tackled the X sound before in Mandarin.
Yeah, I guess that would be an example of like what I was saying, that if you don't have enough familiarity with the sound, then maybe you don't try to say someone's name correctly.
Yeah.
But maybe you don't even know that you're not saying it correctly,
Yeah.
If you've never heard that sound, or you don't realize you've heard that sound, then, maybe it's not intentional.
Mm-hmm. I mean, hearing it is one thing, but being able to produce it is another
For
thing.
sure.
Absolutely. So when speaking words that I do still Canadian Englishify in my pronunciation, it's because I can't claim to say them close to correctly in the original or originating language. So in those cases, it makes sense not to bother, like we said. Take a word like tsunami. I will not say that with a Japanese accent because I haven't confirmed with anyone if it's tsunami or tsunami or tsunami, because there's 3 syllables to choose from. So
to paraphrase a national treasure of Canada in just one of the best movies ever, you don't know which emphasis to put on which syllable.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mike Myers, if anyone's wondering. Even if you can only do a slight nod to another accent when you say a word from another language in the middle of English speech, because that's all you can muster, it still shows that you are listening and hearing what native speakers say, even if you can't perfectly reproduce it yourself. As long as you aren't exaggerating it or saying it like you're waiting for a shower of compliments from people, then what's the problem with giving a nod to the original word? Basically, if you can say it without looking apologetic or literally cringing, then why not say it in as close to a standard accent as you can? I strongly believe that it is harder to learn other languages if you can't imagine your own voice being allowed to take on the sounds of a second language. So this is why I feel like we have to loosen our grip on this idea of a perfect accent. I prefer words like correct or accurate over perfect because they convey the necessity of the sense of effort without an unrealistic endgame standard. It leads people who think, I don't have an accent in my native language, to believe the unhelpful thought of, I'm no good at languages, therefore I'm not going to learn any new ones.
Right. That's helpful.
Here's the crux of the blueprint. One of my favorite lessons for my ESL or EAL students when I was teaching in Vancouver was the give yourself another hat lesson. I think this comes from when I was in preschool. A lot of teachers will, in kindergarten or something, they'll say, put your thinking caps on. I used to think that it was like a dome with a crank. So I told my students
I always thought it was a whirly one.
Oh. When it comes to accents, I would demonstrate to my students to try and help them get a little bit more confidence in their own abilities. I would say, so let's say the sentence, you are my very good friend. A Westerner who's only been doing Mandarin for a week is going to say, "你," if their tones are correct, they're going to say, 你是我的好朋友. Very English sounding, right? And all of my students, whether they knew Chinese or not, because they were from all over the world, they could tell, oh yeah,
they're all like,
a Canadian person speaking that Chinese sentence right there.
That's a herd Canada right there.
So I showed them that I can do both. I can do my Canadian, I'm speaking English right now with my Canadian English accent. When I move over to Mandarin, I can still be in the gear of Canadian accent and say, 你是我的好朋友. But if I tighten it up, I put on that Chinese hat, I allow my voice to have expanded. I allow my capabilities of what sounds my voice can produce to expand, then I have room in my brain to accept 你是我的好朋友. I really exaggerated that there, but you can see the difference between 你是我的好朋友 versus 你是我的好朋友, right? A lot of light bulbs went off. That was a really fun lesson to do because there's a lot of people in the class. Every time that I would bring that up, they were like, oh, right? Because I think a lot of them just would come to Canada, feel overwhelmed because they're like suddenly in an immersion environment, and they would kind of get a little bit bogged down by all of the the inputs coming in, and then you know, kind of lose the faith and find it hard to believe that they could do something like that, you know. So that was one of my favorite things to show students, particularly because it's cool that that could be transmitted to them, whether they were a Saudi student or a Japanese student or from anywhere, really.
That is very cool. I like that a lot. Light bulbs. That's cool. And that brings us to a little segment where we highlight something in language learning culture, or the like that we love or we want to just go away. In the spirit of our respective second languages, we call this segment oh la la or boo boo boo. If it's something that we love, we'll give it an oh la la. But if it's something we want to put an end to, we'll give it a boo boo boo, which means no, no, no in Mandarin, but also conveniently sounds like boo in English. So for today's episode, Rebecca will be sharing her thoughts.
There is somebody on Instagram, and you know, I mean, everyone's on a whole bunch of channels these days, so who knows where else he is, but his handle is at Prof Woody Mr. Ford. So at PROFWOODYMRFORD. And his videos are perfect for learning about accents and pronunciation and listening and spelling. One video in particular has the description, here's a good tip to help learn a new language. And it has hashtag language learning, hashtag linguistics, hashtag spelling. So probably you can scroll and look for the caption of that video and you'll be able to find it. He's just someone who really explains why things are the way they are in going from English to another language and back again. And really think that if you're a native English speaker, a lot of the stuff that he has to say is really eye-opening and kind of confidence building, I think.
Nice. Well, that's appropriate because now we're gonna love you and leave you with our last segment, your Joy Builder. Before we go, we want to leave you with a quick recap, a foundational nugget that should serve as the focal point of what you take away from this episode in order to continue building confidence as a language learner. To answer the question, but how do I know which accent is the right accent? The main answer is if you are earnestly trying to sound intelligible, you're still allowed to sound like yourself. You're allowed to use your voice, your vocal cords, your tongue, your teeth, your lips to make sounds that you can make. When learning a new language, you can't start by deleting all of your language history since birth so that your brain is a completely clean slate. You're allowed to have your English accent and your French accent and so on. I don't mean it's okay to play up an accent in an offensive way.
No.
I mean, as an earnest student of a language, it is okay to sound like yourself while speaking it. Aim for the accent that works best for you. Try your best. But in the end, go easy on yourself. People shouldn't be such extreme accent snobs that others get turned off of learning new languages.
I love that because I grew up in Canada. I think you know that.
Yeah. I grew up in Canada across the hall from you.
Yeah. So I can almost always tell if someone was raised in a Cantonese household by how they speak English. I can tell if someone grew up in a house with Hindi or Punjabi speakers because of Canada's mosaic. Those people have Canadian accents too. I love that about Canada.
You just said
To
a boat.
set a boat. By the way, world, we don't say a boot. Maybe Eastern Maritimers do, but most of the rest of Canada, when we say the word ABOUT in a funny Canadian way, that sounds funny to you folks, it's we're not saying a boot, we're saying a boat.
I'm going out in a boat.
Yeah, boat.
I'm going out
Or
in a
we
boat.
cut off the A and say boat this much, boat that much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway,
What is it? I'm going out in a I'm going out in a boat.
oot in a boot, there's a goose loose in the hoose.
There's a goose loose in the hoose. Yeah. I'm going out
let's
in a boot.
let's
There's
go
a goose
oot in a
loose.
boot. There's a goose loose in the hoose. Yeah. And to touch on something that I think we briefly said in episode 2 or 3, it's really fun when you can hear, in my case, I hear a British accent in a lot of Chinese people's accents because it's obvious that a lot of the learning materials that they used were from the UK. There's one movie that you and I both love, and I forget the name of it, but it was takes place in Scotland. Is it like Dear Frankie or something?
Yes, Dear Frankie is the movie.
Okay.
And you are thinking of Gerard Butler.
Yeah, the movie called Dear Frankie. It takes place in Scotland, and it was the first time I had ever heard a Chinese person speak in a Scottish accent. And it was so delicious and delightful. They were just speaking English with a Scottish accent, every one that I had heard in my life to that point, because I saw the movie when we were like teenagers, I think. It struck me. I was like, whoa, but of course that there would be, people who are not originally from a certain country, learning the language of that country and getting the accent of that country, and it not sounding Canadian, it not sounding, English. It was like it was like hitting myself over the head, like, duh, of course. And how fun is that? People who started in one country and are part of the diaspora, they all aren't going to have the same accent. That's fun and exciting. And that's one of the best parts about Canada, like I was saying, is you've got so many people speaking English or French with so many different accents, but it's not just, I'm not just hearing a South Asian person originally from India who is speaking English with an Indian accent, but like you were saying in a couple episodes ago, you can tell that how they learned English was in a British way.
Yeah.
And I don't know if
so much.
I don't know if there's a lot of other countries in the world that, I mean, I'm saying I don't know this. Like, I don't know that there's a lot of other countries in the world that emphasize multiculturalism as much as Canada. We literally have a multicultural policy that came in and like was passed by our government in the 1970s. Some people think that Canada's all about English and French, but really we've made room for other cultures to be celebrated and that kind of thing.
But quick tip, if you're an American actor and you're trying to pretend that you're from Toronto, no one says Toronto. We say Toronto.
Yeah, no, Toronto, definitely.
It's a tra. It's not Tor.
Yeah, Toronto.
Yes.
I think we've made it perfectly clear that different accents are well worth nerding over. And because they're worth nerding over, people shouldn't be snobby about them. And you should lighten up on yourself when it comes to getting a perfect accent. Just shoot for legitimate.
If you found value in today's episode, you'll find show notes and links at our website, littlecrabpress.ca, which is also home to our little freebie library, and so much more. If you haven't already subscribed, make sure you tap that button to keep on breaking new ground in your language learning. Lastly, please take a moment to review the show on your podcast app, or to send this episode to someone you think could use it. It all helps us continue to build a safe space for the fluent and fluentish that is free of snobbery and filled with joy.
A Scottish actor, my brain's
Alan
going
Cumming.
Gerard Depardieu, and it's not Gerard Depardieu.
It really felt like it should have been Friday.
Yes, yesterday felt like it should have been Friday. Hard. Okay, love you, bye.
Fluentish the podcast is brought to you by Little Crab Educational Press. Thank you to the language learning communities on Blue Sky, Reddit, and Instagram for sharing openly about the struggles that people have to overcome to persevere in the pursuit of becoming fluent or fluentish in an additional language. Remember to subscribe, rate, review, and share from wherever you get your podcasts. This show is edited and produced by Rebecca Juten with graphic design and support work provided by Lisa Zach, both of whom also research, write, and host each episode. The theme music is by the Canadian duo Milk Fangs. Hear more from them on bandcamp.com.
Fluentish the podcast is recorded remotely between Victoria and Vancouver, which sit in the unceded traditional territories of several Coast Salish nations, across which we are grateful to live and work.